Hi, and welcome back to Museum at Home. Now today we are looking at one of my absolute favourite things, castles. Now when we think of the Middle Ages, of stories of knights and princesses and tournaments, we think of huge stone castles. They feature in all the stories, and we find them in stories like Robin Hood, Nottingham Castle, King Arthur, Camelot, and in films. Think of all those Disney fairy tale castles too. So castles are really a part of our culture, and we can come across them in Britain, in Europe, and in places all over the world. But how would you go about designing a medieval castle? A castle created several centuries ago. What are the different parts of a castle? What words can we use to describe them and to describe the way that they were made? Let's find out a little bit more in today's Museum at Home. Now, first off, imagine that you are a medieval lord. You are currently in favour with the king because you played an important role in supporting his latest campaign. And you have been granted a little bit of land and the remnants of a building. You know that your position isn't secure. With new wars come new campaigns and new threats to your power. And even neighbouring counties can become enemies. So, you need a home, but a home that will protect you against all of these different enemies, and that will be big and grand enough to show everybody that you mean business, and that will hold out against a sustained attack. So, you build a castle. So, what exactly is a castle? Well, it is, or it was, a fortified and well-protected home. In the Middle Ages, royalty and nobility, important and wealthy families, would build castles on their land. Now, these castles weren't just homes, they were defended in the most up-to-date technology at the time, in amazing ways, and they were designed to hold out against attacks from enemies and from rivals. Now, if a castle was besieged, if it was attacked over a period of time, it could be a very long process. The longest recorded castle siege took place at Kenilworth Castle in the Midlands in 1266, almost 800 years ago, and it lasted for 6 months. So, you needed a castle that could keep people out and protect the people inside for a very long time. Now, the way that castles were designed made them as safe and secure as possible, and they had lots of features to protect those who lived within the walls. Not all castles looked exactly the same. Some, particularly very early castles, were very simply a mound with a wooden keep or a protective, sheltered space, a structure, on the top, and a ditch running around the outside. Now, as time went on, castles became more elaborate. Stone was used more because, well, it's stronger than wood and it can withstand fire. And layers of protection were added as well. Not just one wall, but rings of walls, one after the other after the other. Battlements from which soldiers could shoot arrows, and towers as well, so that a lookout could be kept. So castles looked very different. Many had comfortable living spaces too, and a great dining hall and bedrooms. Others were much simpler. But most castles had some key features, and we are going to look at what those key features are today. So, what makes a castle a castle? Now, we know that there's no strict rule for what a castle should look like, but very often we think of it looking something rather like this. Now, this is the castle in Ludlow. It's Ludlow Castle, a ruined medieval castle in Shropshire. Now, of course, today we are missing lots of key bits. What can't we see in this picture that you would expect? A roof, bits of the walls and some of the stonework. But you can still see many of the main parts that make up the castle. Now, what can you spot in this picture? Well, first, we can see walls. How would you describe them? Small, thin, or strong and thick? Well, these walls are incredibly thick because they are designed to keep people out. How about the windows? Are they large and decorative and wide? Or are they small? I'd say that they are quite small. Now, this is to keep the walls as strong as possible and to have as little weakness in the structure of the castle as possible. Smaller windows, safer castle. But what can you spot on the top of the walls? Now, these are the battlements, and they were designed to allow soldiers to walk around the walls and shoot arrows through the crenellations, the sticky up stone bits, if the castle was attacked. So they were a really important defensive feature of castles. Now, everything about this castle is designed to defend and to protect the people inside. Now take a look at this picture. You can see the very heart of the castle, the keep. Can you spot the tower with the flag at the top? That's it. That's the keep. The keep was right at the centre, and it was made of very thick stone walls with very, very few windows, so that it was really strong. If the castle was under attack by enemies, this was pretty much the safest place to be. And to get into the castle, can you see a fairly narrow entrance? You can see a path that leads over a ditch to the castle gate. What's the bridge over? Well, that ditch that runs around the castle is called a moat. Now, sometimes a moat was filled with water, or it could be dry, but either way, it made it harder for the enemy to get up close to the castle. Now, many castles had a drawbridge, a bridge that could be lifted up to stop people from getting to the gate. But if an attacker made their way to the gate, if they managed to get past the drawbridge and the moat, they might find themselves rather stuck. Because most castles had something called a portcullis, a huge metal grating that would crash down and close off the entrance. Now, a particularly well-defended castle might even have some other things to protect it by the gate. Some things called murder holes, and now through them water could be poured in case the enemy was starting to set fire to things, and the murder holes would be used to pour water through. And arrow slits as well, so that soldiers could shoot at incoming attackers. Many castles also added towers, and these allowed people to look out, to watch out for the enemy, and somewhere to shoot from too. But inside the castle, not everything was doom and gloom. Many castles were richly decorated and had spaces for living and for feasting. Now take a look at this picture. This is Goodrich Castle, a very important medieval castle on the border between England and Wales. Now, there was very often fighting on these bits of land and between the lords in this part of the world. So a defensive castle was a very important structure to have if you were a lord in this area. You can see the strong keep on the left-hand side. Look at those tiny, tiny windows. You can see that it was made to defend the people inside. But look to the right. There is a very large room with big windows and lots of space inside. Now that was the castle's great hall, and it was used for any celebrations. There was a kitchen on the site to supply the food for any of the feasts that took place in the great hall. And there was also a solar, a sitting room, and even a little chapel as well. So this castle was full of things to make life comfortable. Now, it's important to remember that castles didn't just belong to royalty. Although we often think of stories about kings and castles or queens and castles, this isn't always the case in medieval history. Castles belonged to lords, to landowners, and land and castles were often given as gifts after battles. They changed hands very often, and they changed a lot over time as well. Bits were added, other bits were taken away, new fortifications were added to make the castle stronger, and new luxuries too. And sometimes new buildings were designed to imitate castles, to look a little bit like them, with features like battlements and towers. But features would only be for decoration, for show, to make it look like a very medieval castle building. So, there is no one single way to design a castle. But today we have covered lots of the key features that you would want to think about including if you were a medieval lord. To try out some activities on this topic of castles, head to the resource pack in the description of this YouTube video, or you can also find it by going to the Museum at Home website. Next time we are travelling back to uncover the world of the Anglo-Saxons. So, see you next time for another Museum at Home.